Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around it's going to be a little bit of a Tomb King double cast, both of which are going to be focused on infantry compositions. So what I see all too often is people complain about the infantry the Tomb Kings have and how inadequate it is and how you can't make it work and how terrible it is in general. So this first matchup we are on the, and so I just decided, why not, we could just mass infantry. I'm sure it could work. And have a little bit of fun, have some ridiculous builds. This first match we on Volksgrad against some Dark Elves, and if you look at my composition, one of the things I did decide to do is bring the Tomb King, and I actually think the vanilla Tomb King is probably the best lord to bring with an infantry heavy composition. And the reason for that is the fact that he does come in with the Amulet of Fasta, or Faster, I don't even know, but it's a great little hex. It's only 220, lasts for 22 seconds, really long cooldown of 120, but it's got big radius. It's 55 meters, really solid, and more importantly, it's minus 48 missile parry and minus 30 armor. So an absolutely monstrous debuff. You can really smack your opponent and take away so much of their advantages. He also does have Tomb Strike, so he cause some fear and terror. I did bring him on a horse here. I didn't really want to overinvest against Dark Elves, where there's a big risk of some monstrous shenanigans, or some anti-large shenanigans and some armor piercing. I don't think armor piercing shooting. I don't really think a Tomb King on, say, a Necro Sphinx, or sorry, a War Sphinx is a good idea. It seems like a quick way to get him killed. So I do just have him here on horseback. He is backed up by his hero squad, one of which is the Lich Priest of Death, who, if we look, you can see it once again bring in some wonderful debuffs. Soul Blight, which is minus 30 armor, but minus 25% weapon damage, so great debuffs. Given that a lot of the Dark Elf damage output is non-AP that they'll bring like Blackheart Corsairs, Oblique Swords, units like that oftentimes. Then after that, the minus 25% weapon damage is really solid, and minus 30 armor is going to be great, especially when stacked with the Amulet of Fasta. And then we do have a Spirit Leech, we've got the Curse of Zar if our guy's almost dead, and finally we do have a Nephros Scroll of Mighty Incantations, which I think is a great little buff to get lots of power recharge. Alongside that, we finally do have a Tomb Prince, so he of course does have Guardian, which is why these guys do both have 18% physical resist. He also does have the Curse of Jaff, which I think is great. Reduces enemy melee attack and rampage if your prince is getting damaged a whole bunch, and he does of course have Tomb Strike. So a sort of solid collection, I think, of abilities here. We've got some coverage against large, we've got some death spells and some debuffs on both of these lords, and some decent combat power in general. Our front line, not necessarily cheap, not super expensive either. We do have the Kepler Guard in this middle here, backed by 2 units of Tomb Guard, so that's a pretty solid anchor. On the periphery, though, just 2 Skeleton Spears to extend the line further and give us some meat shields. Even further, 2 more Skeleton Spears, and here, 2 Tomb Guard with Halberds. I figured, some AP anti-large is definitely critical. What's probably the core of this army is this Horde of Skeleton Archers, and you can see the Blessed Legion of Demonetization here. With its armor sundering. So we've got 3 abilities, guys, that can reduce enemy armor by 30, so really hoping to get good value out of them, and then 2 units of normal skeleton archers on either side. So lots of shooting, lots of potential damage. For my opponent's build, it's definitely very sort of wide and pretty numerous for a Dark Elf composition. It's not something you see all that often. My opponent did actually bring a Dreadlord with sword and crossbow on Pegasus back. He does have the volley of dark arrows, so going to be doing some decent damage, and he's going to be a major league nuisance with this sort of build. He's backed by the Raven Heralds, which I personally think are a pretty terrible unit. They can definitely be a powerful harass tool and can be a major pain in the rear, but honestly, they're just so squishy. 2800 HP is just pitiful. I don't care how mobile they are. They're just not that good, in my opinion. And you guys can feel free to disagree, but that's just my 2 cents on it. Regardless, big old harass squad on the ground, or up in the sky. On the ground, he does have a Caster of Shadows with Enfeebling Foe, with Belcast Miasma, with Withering. Interesting choice against Tomb Kings, honestly. I guess it can help against constructs, but not that much. I don't know. Smoke and Mirror is also a bit odd. I wouldn't really bring that usually, at least not when you're not concerned about gap closing or anything like that. On the flanks, my opponent does have 2 Dark Riders with shields, as well as the Slaanesha's Harvesters, so a good selection of sort of light cav there. And honestly, against the Slaanesha's Harvesters, I don't have too many answers here. I don't have anything that really does magic damage, so they'll be somewhat tanky with their 40% physical resist. My opponent also does have some Dark Riders with repeated crossbows, and his infantry core, while not exactly hyper elite, is definitely decent. You can see 3 units of Dread Spears, one of which is the Helibroni, 2 to Blackguard, and then 3 units of Dark Shards shields. So definitely not a bad build, lots of light cav, and potentially a lot of nuisance ability for my opponent. Regardless, I do have a lot of anti-large, so I feel somewhat comfortable in my ability to engage him. You can see already sniping away with the Spear Leech against the Dreadlord. Trying to do a little bit of chip damage. In turn, I'm getting shot up a little bit, but we're going to juke away mostly and avoid most of that arrow fire. Perhaps a little greedy of me, honestly, but it's okay. Regardless, we didn't do much damage to the Dreadlord, honestly. I think this is like, we did maybe 400. I'm not even sure if that much, honestly. We look at it, I mean, 300 damage, not even. So pretty pitiful damage there from Spirit Leech. I don't know if Spirit Leech has been nerfed. I haven't really been getting such good experience with it lately. Maybe it's maybe I'm missing something, I don't know. But it's just haven't really seemed to be performing for me. So I don't actually know my opponent's got all this light cav here. And so as I'm deploying, you can see we're just shuffling her along, positioning our armies. I'm trying to get all my spearmen and all my infantry aligned. You can see a volley of high arrows coming in, or dark arrows, or whatever it is, coming in, clocking my Lich Priest. My opponent is trying to snipe out my lords. This is really what he's focusing on. Which is annoying. That's definitely a bit of a nuisance. You can see I'm trying to screen out his cavalry over here, zone them away. He's trying to encircle me and surround me. You can see I actually just start unloading on these Dark Shards. Their armor gets dropped to nothing by the fire from the Blessed Legion, and they're doomed. The Amulet of Fasta goes down over here on this area, and you can see these guys are just going down like a 9-pin. They have no missile block, basically. It's like 7, I think, and they really don't stand a chance. And you can see those Dark Shards go down immediately. In the meantime, the Kepler Guard does gap close. You can see the Tomb Guard gap closing, and against this cheap, crappy front line of Dread Spears, Tomb Guard will do incredibly well. And you can see over here the poor Dark Shards getting demolished by that focused fire, by the Kepler Guard. Just so much pressure being applied here. Unfortunately for me, though, big mistake. I actually pushed my spears forward to engage here, and that leaves this entire flank open. And you guys can, of course, already see what's coming. There's not much to say there. I'm getting chipped away at by my opponent's shooting mob here. You can see the Dreadlord being a Major League nuisance and all that stuff. And honestly, things are going okay. We shatter the Dark Shards. These guys are really mauled. My opponent is in a very bad spot right now. Despite being weakened by Enfeebling Foe, the Kepler Guard is just pushing onward. And we're all in all okay, but due to my bad positioning on the spears, on the Tomb Guard, my opponent's able to push his Slaanesh Harvesters through. He's able to push his Dark Riders through. My poor Lich Priest is collapsing because he's, of course, is very badly mauled. He's been getting sniped away at by the Dreadlord. I do cast a Soul Blight over here, debuffing all these guys' armor, making them much more susceptible to Tomb Guard. And I'm trying to pull my Tomb King back, but I'm going to be losing my poor Lich Priest. We do get a Curse of Zar over here off on the Blackguard, but it's just a rough spot and really a bad play for me. A Soul Stealer does go down, destroying my Tomb King, destroying my Tomb Prince, all this infantry just getting hit. My opponent's getting massive value here, and really, the fact that I left this flank open, that I got stupid and pushed my Skeleton Spears forward, is costing me immensely here. I've opened up a path for my opponent, and he has exploited to the full, and you can see my opponent running amok here in the backline. However, one of the benefits of Skeleton Archers is that they just don't break. They don't give a darn. They can be dying horribly, and they will keep fighting, because they honestly just can't die. They're skeletons, so they just keep peppering away. We are shelling away at these Blackguards, slowly but surely chipping away. Honestly, despite their armor, it will eventually get chipped down, and that's really. And I know that all these other units that my opponent has, except for this Blackguard and this Blackguard, are not really a threat to me in the long run. Slaanesh's Harvesters we can deal with, and you can see they're actually being dealt with pretty brutally. They've already used the Soul Stealer. They're not going to get any more heals. They're getting demolished. This infantry isn't going to hold either. So most of this stuff I can chip away. I can get rid of these guys, and I should be able to be in an okay spot. Unfortunately, they are able to kind of squirm away again. It's really hard to stop them from escaping, especially with their physical resist, so they'll just eke their way out of there. And my opponent is using his Dark Riders really well here, shutting down my backline, screwing over my Blessed Legion, and really putting some hurt down on me. And once the Blessed Legion's gone, I'm going to be losing those armor debuffs and be in a really rough spot. Unfortunately, one of the things I'm really paying for here is simply that initial sort of spear deployment, the fact that I'm pushing my Tomb Guard into the front. Honestly, I should have been peeping these spears back and protecting my front line, and just left the Tomb Guard and the spears I had in the front to do the damage. My opponent does try to pull his Dark Shards back. They're going to get pounded into oblivion because my archers are going to have none of this nonsense, and they snipe these poor Dark Elves down really quickly. They're just having a terrible day. The front line, though, is very grindy. You can see Tomb Guard and Blackguard trade surprisingly efficiently. Tomb Guard's not getting much in the way of kills, but neither's the Blackguard. It's kind of atrocious. You can see the Raven Herald here forced to break off. The Tomb King has dropped below 50% HP. He does have Tomb Strike activated, so he's able to force him off. I do believe they're being hit by a curse. You can see the Dark Shards here being overwhelmed as these Dread Spears are collapsing. And so although my opponent is constantly trying to shut me down, constantly harrying my archers here, I do still have a decent chunk of units, and I do start chipping away at my opponent's Dreadlord with all these archers. The Dreadlord does have 90 armor, but I figure, you know, I can chip away at him a little bit, zone away some of these annoying skirmishers, and just try to hold up. And really, I'm paying a huge penalty here for the fact that I just let my formation collapse. Don't let your formation collapse. Don't get so greedy. That's really what I'm paying for in this situation. You can see these cotton candy attacks here melting my poor skeleton archers. They're having a terrible day. The Doomfire Warlocks holding surprisingly well. The skeleton spears do try to push in from behind. They'll do some damage, but it's really just not that efficient. My Tomb Prince and Tomb King over here do catch the Dreadlord. You can see he's being hit by a Word of Pain from the Lanish's Harvesters. But, you know, the Dreadlord does take a bit of a beating before he's able to get clear. He's lost about, I don't know, about a third of his HP, maybe half at this point, and he's really having a rough time. My opponent does get a rear charge here on the Tomb Guard, but that's not all that good of a move. The Raven Heralds, like we said, are really squishy. They're not going to hold up well at all, and the Tomb Guard obviously isn't going to break. They're too disciplined. They're too dead for that to care. So either way, at this point, the balance of power shifting decisively in my favor, but my opponent is just able to keep picking away at me, keep being a major league nuisance, and I've actually lost most of my shooting. So because of that bad management, major shooting loss. That's also one of the problems with doing a very infantry-heavy build or a pure infantry build, is the fact that you are liable to get surrounded, you are liable to get outmaneuvered, and that's kind of what we're paying for here. And my opponent is able to like squeeze his Dark Riders in here. I'm obviously not able to focus on them. I need to be dealing with the Blackguard. So my opponent's getting some major value there. In the meantime, though, this Blackguard is getting chipped away at pretty horribly. You can see the Tomb Guard, although losing, has actually knocked off about 33 models on these Blackguard, which is a big, big win. In the meantime, over here, I had to use the Tomb Prince on these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, and he is absolutely taking these guys to pound town. He's an absolute beast, honestly. The Tomb Prince isn't really a solid choice, I think, in just about any matchup. And unfortunately for me, though, my opponent continuously chipping away at my Lord here with his Dreadlord with sword and crossbow. It's just such a pain in the rear. There's very little I can do to defend against it, especially now that my archers are gone. You can see there's like 300 HP taken off in a single shot. Just such a pain. Now my Tomb Guard are engaging on the Blackguard. Honestly, I think, especially with the and I do drop an Amulet of Fast on them, just trying to debuff this area, dropping these Dark Shards as well, making them more susceptible. Honestly, I think the Tomb Guard at this point could probably win. There's just too many of them. By sheer attrition, both units probably have a near minimal chance to hit. So, by sheer attrition, I think the Tomb Guard should win. Unfortunately, my Lord's about to die, and this could definitely tip the balance decisively out of my favor. And you can see my opponent kind of taking turns, sniping my Tomb King, sniping my Tomb Prince, and doing immense damage. Because the bolts on the Dreadlord do quite a bit of work. If we look, I don't know if it's a repeating crossbow, but per shot, it's 280 AP damage per shot volley, so that's pretty crazy. That's definitely very powerful, and you can see my opponent getting great value out of this. It's really great usage here of the Dreadlord. So a Lord that's normally kind of underestimated, and definitely good work. Unfortunately for me, despite my efforts to keep my Tomb King safe, he's going to get sniped there by the volley. But not before the rest of his army, or my opponent's army, has essentially been demolished. You can see he's still chipping away at some of my infantry, so my Tomb Guard will probably crumble. But at this point, my opponent has been reduced to just these few Blackguard, and I do actually get a nice little snag. This is the cool thing about Curse of Jaff. I cast it, my opponent, who was definitely being a little greedy there, trying to chip away at me, is not able to do anything about it, so I pull him down. Unfortunately, my Tomb Prince here doing this sort of stupid little dance running around in a circle, but I pull my Tomb Guard back. I just don't care at this point. I want to get this guy. I want to snag him, and so the Tomb Guard comes in. We're going to surround him. We're going to start beating this ugly Pegasus until he goes down. You can see he's just getting completely chunked here by the Tomb Guard. Tomb Guard is decent in melee. They're comparable to, say, Empire Halberdiers. And with the backing of the Tomb Prince in there, this guy's going to have a terrible day. The Rampage does wear off fairly quickly, but it's too little too late at this point. The Tomb Prince is in there. He's knocking this guy's face in, and he's dead. So, a pretty brutal fight. Honestly, I paid for that disintegrating formation. I think it shows, that, honestly, some of those debuffs you can get are absolutely brutal. Also did show the power of the Dreadlord, honestly, and it gave me a newfound respect for this Lord. My opponent didn't have to invest too much in this guy, and he probably got pretty good value out of him. He managed to essentially snipe a caster. He managed to snipe my Lord. Just a major league pain in the rear. But yeah, you can make infantry work, and honestly, against a faction like Dark Elves, I think it's pretty viable. I definitely made some misplays, and honestly, the biggest problem is that despite having more than enough spears and halberds to cover my periphery, I didn't. I honestly should have just played it a little more cautiously and rather than sort of panicking and sending my halberds out to chase stuff, what I should have done is just boxed up. My opponent did not have the shooting to trade with me tit for tat in a shootout. I could have just pulled my spears back, collapsed inward on my formation, and just kept a defensive box around my infantry. And honestly, Dark Riders, it doesn't matter. It's just Riders, Slanesh, Dark Riders, none of those units are going to be able to do anything to your against a bunch of Tomb Guard and Skeleton Spears. So that was a big mistake on my part, but definitely in those few seconds when we were hitting debuffs and we had the archers up and running, they were doing immense damage. And I definitely think it's a pretty potent build against factions that are pretty elite and struggle to deal with mobbing and this quantity of shooting. They just don't really have the tools to deal with it. So great game to Gimme Toro here. We are going to hop on over to the second matchup. This one's going to be against Dawi, and hopefully that one's going to be as much fun as this one. So this time around, we are playing against Dawi, or more specifically, Clan Angrand, and as you can see, the comp has changed a little bit, and I do think you obviously need to adjust your composition. You can't just run the same thing against two rather different factions like Dark Elves or Dwarves. Nonetheless, both are very elite factions. That is one of the things, that is one of the situations where I think the Tomb King Infantry mob can really shine. Against more elite, less wide capable factions, that is really where you can do a great job. And in comparison, if you try to make this sort of thing work against something like Greenskins or Empire, or against Empire it might work out sometimes, but against something like, because Empire does tend to bring somewhat thin builds sometimes, but especially against factions like Greenskins or Skaven, or units, factions like that who can kind of bring their own mob of, say, Plague Monks or Bagons or something, this will not do that great. But in this sort of situation, against the Dawi, you can see we did change and shake up the comp a little bit. It's definitely not the same thing. For my Lord, though, still bring the Tomb King. I still think he's awesome. He's just so solid. There's no reason to bring a Tomb Prince in this matchup because you don't need an anti-large, and I don't know, he could be okay with his AP, but I don't really think it's worthwhile. So we do have the Tomb King with Amulet of Hasta again, with Tomb Strike, so basically, once again, bring him for the debuffs and the support, and he's alongside a Lich Priest of Death. This time around, slightly different composition. We got Soul Blight, we've got Spirit Leech. I was going against Clan Angrand. If I wasn't going against Clan Angrand, I probably wouldn't have brought Spirit Leech, but I wasn't sure if my opponent would bring Ghost Ancestors. I didn't want to run into those and not have some sort of magic solution. Life Leeching, of course, Purple Son of Zerus, Curse of Zar, as well as this Nephros Scrolls of Mighty Incantation, so good stuff. Purple Son of Zerus, I think, so against the Dawi, you don't want to rely on magic all that much. I didn't bring the Kepler Guard here because they do magic damage, and honestly, even if your opponent doesn't bring, say, a Rune Lord to buff their magic resistance up to 40%, Dawi, well, completely dumpster something like Kepler Guard. Honestly, they're for the cost, the Kepler Guard are not a good counter to Dwarves, especially the Dwarves have fire attacks, they've got armor of their own, so Kepler Guard's lack of AP is a problem, and of course the magic damage means they're instantly down at least 25, maybe 40%. So I personally don't think they're a great choice, but I do think you want sometimes a little bit of combat magic can be okay. The Dwarves tend to have tight formations, and I think the Purple Sun's actually not bad. Fate of Buna, bit iffy, but with the Purple Sun, you can kind of just throw it out, and if your opponent's somewhat blobbed up, you're probably going to get some value out of it, especially if you're in a situation where you can't get use out of these other spells. For the rest of the comp, though, front line of Tomb Guard, dirt cheap for their cost, but pretty efficient. I do believe they beat, for example, Longbeards in a straight-up fight, backed by 2 Skeleton Warriors on the flanks just to provide some fodder and block up my opponent's Slayers if he tries to flank, anything like that. 5 Archers, once again, Blessed Legion of Demonetization, and then 4 normal Archers. And then out on the periphery, we do have the 2 dirt cheap Skeleton Chariots. So those of you who don't know or didn't read the patch notes or watch my video or whatever, I don't, doesn't really matter. These guys did go down in price by about 150, so they're much cheaper now. And I figured, you know, maybe against Dwarves we can make it work. They could be decent. But my opponent brought a build that basically hard counters them. Definitely not a bad build for dealing with monsters. You can see for his front line, he did bring a Lord here. Interestingly enough, I don't know what's giving this guy. If we look at this Lord, he's got perfect vigor. I don't. Is that from the old Grumbler? Oh, he's got the Iron Warden's Hammer. I did not actually realize he's got this ability, so I guess that's been added. See, I haven't noticed that. Oops. He does have the Star Mellow Plate. I actually do remember seeing that, so that's pretty cool. So that's a very potent debuff. Iron Warden's Hammer, that's really cool, actually. Perfect Vigor is incredibly powerful, especially on a Dwarf who's basically never going to break. Foe Seeker, stand your ground, so very solid buffs there. Front line of Longbeards, who will trade okay. I don't think they win against Tomb Guard in a 1v1, but they'll trade okay. Grumbling Guard and Longbeards, this is, I think, an iffy pick. If there's one iffy pick in this comp, this is it. You don't need AP really against infantry against Tomb Kings. Like, honestly, some extra Longbeards would be good. The Grumbling Guard I can kind of get with the bigger aura, but normal Longbeards, I don't know. I don't think they're really worthwhile. They, especially not with the gold chevrons. You'd be better off just bringing an extra unit of normal Longbeards and maybe some Dwarf Warriors or Miners or something. For the shooting contingent, my opponent did bring 2 cannons, so a lot of artillery, and they are immediately tearing a bloody swath through my Skeleton Chariots. You can see these guys just getting dumpstered. Poor little Skeleton Horsey's not doing too good. Same thing on the other flank, but I honestly don't care. The Skeleton Chariots were, like I said, dirt cheap, and I'm actually just throwing them into the grinder here, not caring, not heeding the losses. If I lose them, it's 1,500 down the drain, but it will give me the opportunity I need to gap close. And really, the core of this army, the most important parts of this army, are these 2 heroes and this mob of infantry. Anytime my opponent does have 2 gyrocopters with brimstone guns who are chipping away, they do fire damage, which does give him bonus versus the fire weak heroes. Actually, the Lich Priest does not seem to have a fire weakness, but I know all the other heroes, I think all the other heroes do. Maybe I'm mistaken. If anybody can correct me on that, that would be great. Regardless, you can see I'm immediately chipping away at these annoying dwarves. You can see I actually just charge the chariots in, realizing I'm not going to get much value there. I charge them in, my opponent pops stand your ground. They're going to do probably nothing, but it doesn't matter. My opponent does have some thunders there to provide a little bit of flexible fire, but once again, wasting gold on chevrons that are really unnecessary. You don't need 9 chevron thunders. It's not going to do you good. Honestly, just normal thunders, save the money, put the gold somewhere else. If you're going to chevron anything up, it should be artillery, in my opinion, and not thunders, for dwarves especially. On the periphery, my opponent does have 2 giant slayers, which are an absolute beasts. Unfortunately, in this situation, they don't have much to fight. This is why this sort of comp is great, because your opponent is expecting to deal with monsters, and you come in with a bunch of stuff that doesn't care about that. Regardless, you can see with all that archery fire, with Soul Blight, my opponent's Longbeards here not doing almost any damage. Their armor is dumpstered, and we're actually just going to dive in here with our lords, with our hero, and do a lot of work. And you can see these Longbeards with great weapons getting torn apart by archery fire. They're of course losing their armor. They're down 60 armor. We haven't even popped their amulet of Fasta at the moment, I don't think. And these guys are getting dumpstered. And you can see I'm swinging my Skeleton Warriors around wide, trying to get around my opponent's flanks. I now do pop the amulet fast. You can see these poor Longbeards with great weapons down to 10 armor. These are dwarves you're looking at. They were down to 10 armor for the longest time, and I'm just annihilating them with focused archery fire. And granted, we are expending a lot of ammunition here, but you know, it doesn't really matter. These guys are going down like 9 pins. They're having a terrible day. And the Tomb Guard can dumpster these Longbeards. They'll win. These Longbeards will eventually lose. And the archers just tear these Longbeards to shreds. The amulet just nuking down their armor. Finally, it does wear off, but it's so too little too late. Over here, a flanking unit of Tomb Guard does catch the Giant Slayers, and you can see they're actually going to do pretty well. They are getting nuked by our cannon fire at point blank, but against Giant Slayers, especially now that Giant Slayers are forced to turn around, they're going to do quite a bit of work. Giant Slayers have good melee attack, but their AP is wasted. Their melee defense is not good enough, honestly, against Tomb Guard, so Tomb Guard will trade really atrociously and really well with the Giant Slayers. In the meantime, Skeleton Warriors getting on top of these cannons, shutting them down. Over here, they nearly got on top of the cannons, but then got body blocked by the Grumbling Guard. And you can see over here, the Slayers positioning to flank them. Grumbling Guard beating the snot out of these Skeleton Warriors. So that's not a great spot to be in, but I'm not really too concerned. You can see all over, my opponent's army is just getting shut down. These Tomb Guard collapsing on the flanks. My opponent does drop his gyros down here, but I immediately pull the Lich Priest, and I'm going to be able to pull my Tomb King to help. Over in the back line, you can see the Skeleton Warriors overrunning these poor cannons, forcing the crew off. You can actually see my opponent doesn't actually demount the guns or the route or anything. He just orders the cannons to walk away calmly, and they do. Perhaps not a bad idea, but he doesn't have units to stop my skeletons right now, so that's a problem. Over here we get a lovely purple sun. You can see these skeletons all got annihilated, but look at how much damage it did. Almost all of that to these giant slayers was that one purple sun. This is really, if you can get a blob against dwarves, often dwarves do blob, you can get this sort of result, and it's just amazing. Great feeling. In the meantime, my archers, you can see, not doing the best as far as HP goes. They definitely got beaten up a little bit by the gyros, but then we pushed them off, and you know, my opponent's sniping away at the Lich Priest, knocking its HP down a lot, but it is what it is. He's already largely done his purpose. You can see the archers destroying the giant slayers, who are such a juicy target because they have no shields like normal slayers. They've got no armor, no physical resist, no nothing. They're just getting wrecked. The Longbeards here is actually staying their ground, but Curse of Zar, another armor debuff. My mage finally does go down, but it's so little, so late. These guys are just getting nuked. So many debuffs, so much armor sundering of all sorts, just destroying these guys' potential to fight, ruining the one thing that makes the dwarves hold well, or one thing that really helps the dwarves hold well. And they're having a terrible day. You can see these Longbeards, despite somehow holding until like almost, well, they're dwarves, I shouldn't be surprised. But despite holding so well, these guys are going to start falling apart. You can see my opponent diving his gyros into melee against my Tomb King, but we got Tomb Strike active, and we're going to be hitting these guys like a truck. They have a terrible diet. These poor gyrocopters are just going to get smited, and they're getting smitten, and they're having a terrible day. I'm surprised they actually haven't gone down. The two are just plowing through. It's pretty funny, actually. There we go. Their one just explodes in the middle of Tomb Guard, and they're just marching on. The undead hordes march onward. Over here, my Shafty Summon did wipe out the gun crew, so good stuff there. My opponent's gun crew over here forced off, and although my opponent is getting some troops back here and there, it is basically GG. I'm focusing out his Longbeards, hitting them with an amulet, and nuking them down. And you can see at this point my opponent's army is going to start suffering army losses. These Grumbling Guard routing off. Sure, there's a handful of Slayers. Or maybe it's not army loss. These guys just had a weird sort of graphical glitch, I guess, with their morale. But either way, you can see the Longbeards here just getting slaughtered, getting driven off by mass arrow fire. And we still have a decent amount of ammo. You can see 5 rounds here, 8 rounds there. 9. So we still have a good amount of ammunition, and my opponent has nothing. He's got a handful of gyrocopters, some thunders, a tiny few longbeards, grave ones. These guys will probably dumpster these skeleton warriors, but who cares? They're skeleton warriors. It's just a handful of giant slayers. My opponent has essentially nothing, and he's getting shredded by arrow fire constantly. Yeah, he's chipping away at my Doom Beam, but who cares? He's going to be out of ammo in a sec, and I can actually kind of dodge those shots if I really want to. So, it's a rough spot. Now, at this point, my opponent is trying to sneak his giant slayers into the back, but I just have so much infantry. So even with some mistaken sort of micro, my opponent does decide to GG out. So as you can see, I won't say this is great against every army, every composition, everything like that. But there are certainly some situations where I think the Tomb King infantry mob is incredibly powerful. Despite micro mistakes in the first game, despite bringing 2 units that literally did almost nothing in the second game, I got some massive value out of my Tomb King force infantry corps. And with debuffs, you need to build around the fact that there's limitations. They don't have great AP. They don't have the best melee stats. They're not the most flexible. There are issues, but you build around them, and you can actually definitely make it work. And a lot of players will not be ready for it. What they think, first thing they think of with Tomb Kings is, of course, monsters and how to deal with them. And oftentimes you'll end up going against a force like this, which is geared almost entirely to dealing with monstrous troops, and then the front line core that should be holding is way too small to deal with your monstrous wave and tide of nasties. And I think there are other ways of doing it as well. You can, for example, besides just the armor sundering, you could also double up mages. Now it could sound a little awkward, but you could double up mages. You could bring a lore of light. You could bring a lore of death caster, and you could bring a lore of light caster. If you drop, for example, a Soul Blight and then follow it up with a Barona's Time Warp, you can get some massive value there. If it's obviously very mana intensive or Winds of Magic intensive and all that sort of stuff, but I think there's definitely these cool combos and always stuff to look out for that you can pull off. Potentially, especially in this sort of situation, if I had a Barona's Time Warp, I could have cleaved through those Longbeards so much faster when they were horribly debuffed already. So definitely keep that in mind. There's a lot of cool combos. Always be on the lookout for those. Do try to keep in mind that, for example, even though I normally suggest don't bring magic damage, there are situations where it can work. Don't be willing to experiment. Do your own tests, guys. There's always some weird stuff you can make work, and just because it doesn't work for one person doesn't mean it can't work for another. So definitely. Either way, great game to my opponent, Demon Choro here, and Toro in the previous one. I do hope you guys enjoyed the videos. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any input, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching and for your support, and I'll see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.